There we go. Okay, so much like we did kind of with our little practice run last week, when you first launch Blender, right, it brings up this splash screen. Now, if you've been working on stuff, you will see stuff in the recent files folder, right? But if you're just kind of doing a new scene, what you can do is you can just click on New File General, right? So there's a new file section over here. If you want to open something that you haven't worked on in a while, right, like, you know, you're not going to have everything in the recent file section, you can just go to Open here, right? So I'm going to go to General, and that just starts you off with a cube, right, a cube. Now, at this point, I like to switch my layout, right, to modeling. We kind of have these guys up here at the top, right? Modeling, right? And it just kind of focuses things a little more on the modeling tools. Pretty much this stuff over here stays the same. Usually what you'll see when you change these is the viewports and like kind of the toolbar on the side here. And this has access to a lot of your major tools. Of course, they're up here as well. And if you right-click, you'll see a lot of them there also. So there's a couple of different ways to get to them, right? One of the things I also like to do is turn the visibility off for the light and the camera. It's kind of annoying to have them in there visibly. So what you do is you go to Outliner up here, right? This kind of really top right corner area. See where my cursor's at? That's our outliner, right? And you can kind of move this up or down. You'll notice I can kind of, you know, when you go to see kind of like the double arrows, you can make this wider, you can make it smaller, right? So you can kind of on the fly adjust the size of your windows, right? But Outliner is kind of a list of all of your stuff in the scene, right? Of course, if you want, you can create collections. We'll talk about that a little later on. But you'll notice that there's these eyeballs, right? They kind of look like an oval with pointed ends and then a circle in the center, an eyeball, right? And I could uncheck those, and you see how it turns the visibility off for the camera and the light. Usually when you see eyeball in a software, it means visibility, right? If you check it off, there's no longer visibility there. All right, so some of the other things that I want to remind you guys that we did the other day, of course, Alt left mouse button, right, rotate your camera, Alt left mouse button, Alt middle mouse button, which is your scroll wheel, right, that'll move your camera, and of course, Alt right mouse button will zoom, right? Technically, scroll wheel zooms also, but it's kind of a bit of a jumpy zoom, so I like Alt right mouse button, right? It just kind of works better for us. Alt right mouse button for zoom. Okay, so just kind of some quick reminders about that stuff. We did want to have a few add-ons on, right? Because they'll be useful for us. So if we go to Edit, right, there's an area called Preferences, right? In the Edit menu, right up here, there's a menu called Preferences. And we go in there, of course, we have things like navigation, so if you want to kind of turn orbit on selection on, which I like having on, that's cool. Key map, that's where if you want to make sure it's on industry compatible, which I prefer, which is what I'm teaching you guys, you want that on there. Save and load, of course, has autosave there, so you can turn that off and on. Probably for you guys, good idea to have it on. But there's also that section called add-ons, right? And this is all of the stuff that comes with Blender. Of course, we're going to add a few that we could download later on. We don't need them quite yet. That's where you just install them from up here. But we can go and turn on a few in here. So I, in general, like to have, particularly for us right now, modifier tools checked on, right? So you just check them on. That's all you do. You just check them on. Auto mirror, check it on. Edit mesh tools, loop tools, kinds of, those are the big ones that I want you guys to have on right now. They're in there, and of course, when we have lab time, you guys can ask questions about these. I am recording this video for you as well, so, you know, we'll be in good shape there. Now, of course, if you want to see some of these, remember, there is kind of this little kind of sideways V. It's kind of right here. It's kind of right next to Outliner, but also kind of right next to the little kind of view. It's kind of like Blender's version of a view cube, like Maya has. It's right here, though. If you click on that V, it opens this up. And you see that there's a section called, you know, you have Item, you have Tool, you have View, Edit, Tools, which you see I've got Speed Retopo installed, but we don't need that quite yet. So for us, it's that. Of course, if you left-click drag on it, so you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? If you left-click drag on it, so you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you put your cursor here, you see how it gives you those little 2 arrows, right? So you see if you p I can just drag that back to close it down. But it's that little V right there. Kind of click on it, opens this up. Edit. I don't want B surfaces right now. I do want auto mirror. I also kind of like to have my loop tools and mesh tools open, right? There's some cool features in there, although like utilities, you have flip normals, all that stuff. You can kind of have those closed or open as you see fit or you need at the moment. But we wanted auto mirror, right? Because technically, if we wanted to not use auto mirror, we would have to put a loop cut down the center, right? And that's, of course, loop cut right here, Alt-C, right? Alt-C is the quick key for that. And then we'd have to delete half the mesh, and then we'd have to go to our blue wrench, right? Because this is kind of our that's our outliner. This is our properties editor, and there's lots of different properties here. The blue wrench really gives you your modifier stack, right? And there is a mirror modifier in there, right? So, of course, you could do this manually without auto mirror. It takes a few extra steps. So auto mirror ends up being really cool for that. I like toggle edit on and editable, and cut and mirror is already on. That's going to put it an edge loop down the center, delete half, and then apply the mirror modifier. So that's kind of why that's always on. Use clipping we like as well. In fact, really, the only one we don't check on is apply mirror, because that would make it for real instead of as a modifier, and we want it as a modifier. Something that we could still turn properties off and on for, right? Something that's still active on the object. And of course, you can pick the axis. The default's X, and that's a good one for me because I've been using X as my preferred axis, well, forever, right? There's no right or wrong, though. Like, if you like Y, okay. I would say do X because I'm doing X, right? But yeah, you just hit the auto mirror button, and there we go. And you see all of a sudden there ends up an edge loop down the center here. And you can see that you could select something on one side, and it happens on the other, right? And you notice that in the blue wrench, there's now a mirror modifier here, right? Clipping's on. It's got the axis picked. We've got the editable on. So we want this modifier to stay there and be active on the object so that we're still getting that mirror feature. This is basically the way Symmetry is set up for us, right? Now, the cool thing is, like I said, I'm going to give you some lab time coming up here. And then I'm actually going to basically go back and redo this lecture today. We're going to, particularly for these first couple of weeks, kind of be doing that. And I'm also recording the video for you guys, so you'll have access to that as well. But, you know, it's kind of a bit of setup for some stuff, but once you get that set up and you get used to using the software, things start to flow and go pretty well for us, right? So we now have Symmetry fully set up, which is great. Remember, you have quick keys like edit mode, right? Remember, there is the kind of little mode right up here, edit mode, object mode, 1 and 4. 1 technically really is edit mode for vertices. 2 will do edit mode for edges. 3 will do edit mode for faces. And you'll see there's actually buttons right up here. You can kind of see that there's little buttons right there too. And you'll notice that the Symmetry works for all of that, right? So if I go to edge, remember, an edge is a line between 2 points or vertices, and a vertex is really, 1 for edit mode is really just a point in space, right? It has a location but no dimension. And of course, 3 is face or a polygon, and that's actually, in this case, quads, right? Quadrangles for us. But you notice how it's selecting both sides. Now, technically, there's nothing wrong with working straight, what we call low resolution, right? What that means is few polygons, right? We're working without a subdivision surface modifier or a multi-resolution modifier. There's nothing technically wrong with that, but that does take longer to do, right? You have to add in every edge loop by hand. You have to do a lot of rounding of the shape by hand. And nowadays, when polygon counts are where they're at in movies, and even in, we're now in the current gen is the PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X generation, right? You don't have to worry about making a ridiculously super low-res polygon mesh. So we're going to take advantage of subdivision surface modifier to make our life easier, right? My biggest rule, though, about subdivision surface modifiers is at some point we are going to apply it, right? So we're not shaping in subdees, and then we're going to turn it off and have this junky, really boxy-looking model. We are actually going to apply it so that that actually makes that those polygons there for real. We're using it as a shortcut, so we don't have to add in everything by hand. So that does mean we make sure we're in the blue wrench, right? The blue wrench, it's right here. It's kind of this little menu system there, blue wrench. And we go to add modifier, right? There's a little kind of pull down menu, add modifier. And you'll see there's one in here called subdivision surface, right? Subdivision surface. We apply that. And you'll notice a couple of things. One, it does give us the low res shape, right? So you can kind of see that we're using the original shape to control this. And what it's doing is it's virtually adding more polygons. You can kind of see before we shade smooth it that there's 4 more quads here, and particularly at corners, it averages the positions of the new vertices, and it kind of has this effect of rounding and kind of shrinking the shape a little bit, which works well for organic stuff or anything that's got a lot of curvature to it. Now, it's kind of annoying to have the control cage way off the surface like this. So usually these little triangles at the very front of your modifiers, right, these kind of little triangles, kind of see it's right here, kind of the very front one. You notice this one has the triangle highlighted blue. This one, it's the same kind of triangle, doesn't have a highlighted blue. So if I click on that, you'll notice what it does is it kind of shows through the full effect on the mesh, right? It kind of, it's, what do they call, editable, right? It's on cage, right? Adjust edit cage to modify result, right? So it's kind of, it's basically showing it all the way on the surface, which is much better, right? You're still getting the same single polygon to work with, but that cage doesn't get in your way. Now, we don't like this faceted look, right? It's basically it's flat shaded right now, right? The polygons aren't blending their shading together. So if I go to 4, right, remember 4 is the quick key for object mode. It is right up here though. I can right click. Remember, right click brings up options in Blender. Right click. The very top is shade smooth. And that gives us that nice kind of more organic look to it, right? So this is kind of getting the overall kind of start set up for us, right? The nice thing is once you have this set up, you're going to be good with that for a while, right? You don't have to apply the mirror and subdivision surface modifiers all the time. Generally, once they're set up, they're going to stay on there until you're ready to do a full apply to them, right? But they do set it up so that if I go to, say, 3, right? Remember, 3 is the quick key for face selection mode. Remember, 1's vertex, 2 is edge, 3 is face, 4 is object. But if I hit 3 for face, you'll notice I have the ability to select faces, right? And it selects on both sides. And we've kind of got that virtual mesh. You notice how it's kind of, we got that rounded shape, but it's not real yet. It's kind of virtual, right? It's the kind of thing we could get rid of this, and it's not there anymore, right? We could just delete that modifier, and boom, all right? But we like that modifier, so we're going to put that back on. And generally, you see the mirror happens first. You want the mirror to be on top and the subdivision on the bottom. You can actually change that order by dragging these, but I rarely need that. All right. So 3 for faces. Remember, left click, particularly when you're using default industry compatible, left click, left mouse button, is your default interaction, right? It lets you kind of left click on the object you want to work with. So I can select that face. Remember, our quiz today, W for the move tool, right? W. W for walrus, right? W for walrus. Or wall, right? So right here, of course, if you're in the modeling layout, you're going to have selection right here, which is Q, W, which is move. And once that move tool's on, we have these handles we could use, right? Now, you could just left-click, drag on the green arrow, and it'll move just along that y-axis, the green. You could, of course, just left-click drag on the blue arrow, and it only drags along the blue or the z-axis. You'll see this red square? If you left-click drag on that, it does the x, or the z and the y, the green and the blue at the same time. But you'll also notice that there is this white circle in the center. that's really just view move. The great thing about Blender is that when you're using industry compatible, your middle mouse button will actually automatically do things like view move, view rotate, or uniform scale. So I don't even have to left click drag on that to do view move, right? I can just do middle mouse button. So I could left click back here, middle mouse button. You see how we can kind of start to stretch out that square a little bit? Because remember, the rounding of the subdivision surface modifier gives us that more organic feel, and we can start to do shaping with that. So remember, W, that's our quiz today, that's the move tool. It's going to allow you to move along many axes, including view. Right, that middle mouse button, you see how it's based on your camera? It's kind of moving it relative to the camera itself. View move. Now in this case, I need more edges, right? I need more edges. So I'm going to do Alt-C, which is loop cut, right? The quick key for loop cut is Alt-C. It is right here, though, in your menu, right? If you've got that modeling layout up, right here, there is a loop cut tool. And now remember, by default, if you just left click, it'll snap right to the middle, which is actually quite cool. In this case, though, and actually for this first one, I think I'll do that, just left click. And you see how now an edge loop has been added, right? And remember, an edge loop is really just edges. Edges are lines. I know this screen kind of gets fuzzy and weird updating sometimes for the TV. There we go, gets caught up. You see there's now an edge loop here, right? And an edge is a line between 2 points, and it goes around with another edge kind of coming out of its head or tail around in a loop. Now, if with the loop, and you see how the loop cut tool's still on, right? It's still on. So if I hold down left mouse button and drag, it'll drag it, right? And then I can go over here and put another edge loop in. Left click drag. And now we have more. Right? I can switch back to W. W for move tool. You saw it turned off loop cut. Usually when you switch to another tool, it'll turn the old one off. And now, since we're already in edge mode, remember 2 is the quick key for that, I can easily just come left click that. And I'm going to show you guys the tweak tool later on, but I want to get you guys just playing with the move tool today. I can select that one, middle mouse button to just kind of view move that a little bit. I can maybe left click this bottom one, middle mouse button. Right, you hold down middle mouse button to move. Maybe kind of select this one, middle mouse button move, select that one. Maybe middle mouse move that one forward a little bit. And you see you can start to get shape. Remember, Alt left is going to rotate around the camera. I can left click drag there, left click there, middle mouse button. So I can bring that in a little bit. Left click there, middle mouse button. So remember, left click is just going to let you select whatever selection type you're in. Edges, faces, vertices. W for move will let you move stuff, right? And you can use the handles, or you can just use middle mouse button for view move, right? So I can left click back there, middle mouse button. And you see how just with a handful of edge loops, just like 3 of them with loop cut, I now have enough to start to get some interesting shape for this. Now, I really want to have a little bit more geometry coming out of this. We could have the claws come out of the sides. We can have them come out of here. It's kind of whichever way you want to do it. There's no real right or wrong there. In this case, I think I'll do it from the sides. So Alt-C for loop cut, right? So good old loop cut again. And I just maybe left click, put that right in the middle. W for move. And of course, if I want to, I could do a little bit of rounding of the shape, right? See how it gets a little square. So maybe select those. Remember, if you double left click, right? So your left mouse button, you double click with it on an edge, it'll select an edge loop. And then I can middle mouse button to kind of round that in a little bit. So double left click, right? All right, and that gives us kind of a good, kind of cool start there, right? Now remember, as you're working, right, you can just go to File, Save As, right? And we could easily kind of, go to the desktop here. We could create a new folder if we wanted to, right? So you can actually create a new folder right there. We could call this, crab. Usually you do underscore creature underscore, we could call this 3dmodelingA, right? And then, of course, we could double-click on the folder. We could go down to here. We could say crab creature, right? Crab creature, crab underscore creature underscore. Underscore is the one next to your plus and minus, right around backspace key on your keyboard. We'll do 3dmodelingA for this one as well. There we go. So having a good naming convention that you follow that makes sense is good, right? The course is 3dmodelingA, and we're making the crab creature because we are going to make a more advanced biped for our next term project. So let's save as. There we go. And now we've actually got this crab creature saved. The last thing I want to do before we stop here, and then, like I said, I'll give you guys some lab time. You can ask some questions, and then we'll kind of come back and I'll redo this lecture again. So you're going to see it again. I won't record the video because we'll already have the video, but I just wanted to get us to start extruding the leg off here today. So I'm going to go to 3 for face mode. I'm going to select on that face. Right, remember 3 for face mode. Now, we have the extrude tool right here. The quick key for that is Control E. So I can hit Control E. Now, if I grab the little yellow plus, this will move along the kind of normal direction, right? The average normal direction. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But I am going to rotate it. So E for rotate, right? E for rotate. It is right here, though. Of course, you can grab these handles to rotate just along one axis, but there is that view move, middle mouse button. Then I could hit W, right, for middle mouse button move. Maybe a little bit of E, rotate. And you notice how I'm rotating my camera around so I can kind of get a better view. And then, of course, Control E for extrude. Now, you can grab that yellow plus, but this also has a middle mouse function, right? So if I just hold down middle mouse button, it'll do a view extrude, right? It extrudes based on your view. And then I could do E for rotate, middle mouse button, right, to kind of get a better view. W for move, middle mouse button. Now remember, you can go back in here, select a different face, middle mouse button with your move tool on, right, W for move. Then go back to here, and you can start to slowly adjust, right? Like maybe middle mouse button, bring that down a little bit. And then, of course, maybe Control E one more time for extrusion. And then maybe another middle mouse button with the extrude tool still on. You notice the tool stays on, right? So that when I do that middle mouse button, it just will let me keep extruding. Now I'm going to select this face here, W for move. Move this down. Let me move that up a little bit. And then, of course, we can do a little bit more here. Control E for extrusion, middle mouse button. And then maybe another middle mouse button. E for rotate, right? Remember, it's right here. The extrude tool's also right there as well. Middle mouse button for view rotate. R for scale, right? So move, rotate, scale. R is the quick key for scale. Middle mouse button does a uniform scale for this. So you see how it kind of just scales that thing in for us all together, making the whole polygon smaller. And then, of course, I could hit 2 for edge mode. W for move, and I can grab that edge, middle mouse button. Maybe that edge. Remember, Alt left mouse button rotates your camera. And that starts to get us the basics. Now, I'm going to come back and still do some more shaping and modeling to this later this week. We're going to add the other leg. I think that'll be a great place to stop for this first real lecture. So I'm going to stop recording.